Okay, everyone. If we can settle down. Just a little housekeeping, please silence your phones so that we can have a nice, quiet presentation tonight. Welcome to all that have joined us this evening at the Women's Club in the historic Bowling Haxall House. I am Sandra Christian, chair of the evening's program. I feel truly honored and humbled to say that we are back in full force tonight in person after a questionable and challenging year of creative, inspired programs. How truly fitting it is that we begin this new season with Janie Molster's outstanding presentation on design, and we also help launch her new book, House Dressing: Interiors for Colorful Living. As noted British designer David Hicks said, the best rooms have something to say about the people who live in them. Janie Molster and her team believe that good design should delight, inspire, and embrace their clients. Janie has stated herself that the most inviting rooms look like they've evolved naturally over time. With a wide portfolio that ranges from family homes to boutique hotels, urban apartments, restaurants, and retail establishments. I'm having trouble. Sorry, people. Janie's tall and I'm short. Sorry. Urban apartments, restaurants, and retail establishments. This Richmond-based designer is equally adept at transforming public and private spaces. Janie's 25-plus years as a design principal and her diverse portfolio, highlighted in her book, have established her as one of the Southeast's premier design leaders. Major publications such as House Beautiful, Traditional Home, Southern Living, Coastal Living, The Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal have featured her many projects. As famed designer Mark Hampton said, real comfort in design, both visual and physical, is vital to every room, and Janie Molster achieves this in every project she designs. So without further ado, we want to give a huge, warm welcome to Janie Molster as she presents House Dressing: Interiors for Colorful Living.
Wow, hello everybody. I am beside myself about being here and just being out. I can see half your faces, and that's good enough for now. But can everyone hear me? This is plenty loud. Okay, great. Well, we'll see if I can master the technology and get this party started. Okay. All right. So, first of all, thank you to the Women's Club. I can't tell you how wonderful and enthusiastic they've been about this talk and this event and their support. And I mean, how about the beautiful staff that's out there to greet you? It's just great to be downtown, and it's great to be here again. And I'm also thrilled that you were able to give some of your time to me, because we know how precious it is. And let me talk forever, I promise I won't, about my passion, interior design. I'm going to explain how I approach the process of designing a home. And then, oh gosh, sorry, we gotta go back. We're cheating here. Okay, this is a little bit different technology. Oh, thank you. Who is that? Can they come up here and push the button for me? Okay, great. Oh, I see, that's on fire. Okay. But I'm going to explain the process of how I approach it. And then I'm actually going to turn the process on myself, my own house. And I'm going to show you how things evolve the way that they do, the way the jumbled wish list and the stacks of design images people have ripped out of magazines become a cohesive, beautiful, but most of all, a personal interior. And I'm also very excited to introduce you to my COVID project, my book, House Dressing: Interiors for Colorful Living. Traveling and talking about the book affords me the opportunity to turn the lens on my own design journey. I've decided there's no better way to walk someone through the design process than to explain how it worked for me. So first we'll take a deep dive into the evolution of my own aesthetic, why it is that I'm drawn to the things in my house, how that translates to an interior schematic. Secondly, I'm really excited to be able to introduce you and give you a little sneak peek inside my book. We'll visit two of the houses, both highly personal, very reflective of the respective owners, but as you'll soon see, extremely different in style and approach. And I'll end today by sharing a little bit of my perspective on what is shaping current trends in the ever-changing design world. But let's go back to the title, which is spot on in reflecting how I personally view the design process. My premise is simple. Dressing a house is not so different than dressing yourself. The design process can be so daunting for some. Our clients wonder, where do they start? Where do they go to find their inspiration? I even often hear, Janie, tell me, what should I like? Well, the answer is easier than most people think. I say, look in the mirror. You confidently dress yourself every single day. And do you dress casually or in a monotone color palette? Or are you always decked to the nines in bold prints and statement-making jewelry? There are big clues everywhere. For example, do you carry a designer handbag? Or are you more of the hipster backpack type? Do you prefer a well-cut suit? Or are you typically in comfy athletic wear? These observations can translate into so many differing design elements. For example, a tailored Chesterfield sofa versus that slouchy sectional we all love. Subtleties in appearance abound, and I often use these clues as a starting point. Now for me, I'm the type that loves comfortable athletic wear, and I definitely lived in it during COVID, yet I do also like to dress up in high heels and cocktail wear as if I'm heading out to a party. And my house definitely reflects my wardrobe. Every room in our house is welcoming for naps or movie marathons, but with a quick tidying up and a dimming of the lights, we're ready for cocktails. So there are so many reasons why we have the preferences we do. Our influences start the very first day that we were old enough to sit up and take note of our surroundings. Well, for me, that moment was sometime in the 1970s. I'm going to take you through my journey of design self-examination in the hope that you'll go home and do your own little self-exam. And if it's not already happening, begin creating a world that tells more of your story. So I grew up in northeastern North Carolina, a little town called Plymouth. I was a short, just under a 2-hour drive from colonial Williamsburg, and all of its influences made an indelible mark on the home that my mother designed for us and also most of the houses that I visited. English antiques were predominant, and Queen Anne and Chippendale furniture atop Oriental rugs were the order of the day. So I was exposed to traditional furnishings, and like a lot of Southerners, I fell in love with inherited treasures and collections. Here we have a guest bedroom of my house in Richmond. I have my collection of brown and white transferware covering the walls. At one point, I had different groupings all over the house, and then it occurred to me, I always tell my clients, your collections are better when grouped together en masse. So I gathered them all up and moved them to what my children now call that plate room. And here's another collection, pretty humble, but I love, and it's Italian papier-mâché trays and bowls. And here they're displayed in a chinoiserie secretary in my foyer. So here we have glass grapes piled atop books on a table in my house in Richmond also. Glass grapes were such a popular thing to collect in the 1950s, and they're sort of having another moment. They're one of those things, they're kind of so out, they're in. My mother gave me some of these, and I've added more along the way. Now even my friends or antique dealer friends will call me when traveling and say, "Hey, check your phone. I found some grapes. I know you want me to buy them for you." Oh, and I love this vintage fashion image, and I've certainly always loved the color pink. But it's not just the color I love here. It's the ruffles on the blouses. It's that side ponytail. It's the whole vibe. I'm definitely a child of the 70s, and the fashion excesses that my mother and my sister chose, the sitcoms I was glued to after school, all of those things made a huge impact on forming what I would later choose to live with in my house. Okay, excuse me, I'm having a quick water break. And I love this image as well, another 70s era one. The clothes are so fun, but it's the stripes on the floors that wander up the wall, down that hallway, up onto the ceiling that really grabbed me. Paint is such an amazing tool. I love using it like this in such a fun and graphic way. I used a similar motif in my own house. Our own kitchen floor is painted with a meandering gray line that forms random squares and takes all sorts of dog-leg turns. I use painted floors a lot, but in this case, it's the traveling line that really captures you. You can't help but wonder, where is it going? And in a slightly more formal vignette in my living room, 2 wide horizontal pink stripes wrap the room at eye level. Now, occasionally, the stripes in this room dive up and down and dead end at corners. Again, remember, the opportunities we have with paint and a little willingness to take a risk are endless. So color blocking fabric in clothes was another great 70s fashion trend. I often struggle with committing to a patterned fabric, and I find that I gravitate toward solids, but I'm also drawn to making a big impact in my home. So I used a color blocking motif to create these curtains at our beach house in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And now, back in my house in Richmond, in the living room, the same one with the horizontal painted stripes, I echoed that same motif in the curtains, again with color blocking, a horizontal band at eye level in pale pink. Now rest assured, this is not a room I designed, but this is definitely the room that I begged my mother for in the late 70s. I wanted my bedroom to be a cocoon of hippie tapestries. Well, as you might imagine, she responded with an emphatic no. But I never really got that yearning out of my system. At our same beach house in North Carolina, I have an antique tapestry holding pride of place above our dining area, as if it's an overscale piece of artwork. And it actually is. I love to collect all sorts of textiles, and in this Turkish Suzani, every stitch is hand embroidered. It's truly a labor of love. So back to my love of textiles, these Mexican tapestries hanging above the beds in lieu of headboards are called otamis. I picked them up in a street market in San Miguel de Allende. They lived for a while as bed covers in one of my son's rooms, I think maybe the one that's sitting in the front row. And now they hang in our guest bedroom in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And also in Chapel Hill, this wonderful embroidered peacock tapestry greets you at the end of the hallway, adding a hanging textile where you might have considered artwork in a more traditional medium brings so much to the table. People always, our guests walk in and they want to touch it. It brings such a tactile element. We always say it sort of brings them in. And now, the last sort of hippie bedroom reference, my own bedroom, in my favorite color. And yes, I finally have that tapestry hanging above my bed. This one is also vintage and Turkish in origin. So if you came here today, because I'm sure every single one of you did, wondering what would a house look like when imagined by a designer who loves color, especially pink, has a passion for antiques, who welcomes glamour but has a serious inner hippie chick dying to get out. Well, I've answered your question and solved your mystery. But let's take a short sneak peek at those two houses I mentioned earlier. They're both brick homes, both in Virginia, but I think that what you'll find significant is their differences. So we're going to start with a gorgeous brick Georgian home built in the early 1920s. It's an impressive house, and its setting is equally impressive. It sits high above the James River and with an expansive lawn that cascades down to the river. The views are panoramic. When I first met this house, I fell in love. Although it has a classic Georgian facade, the floor plan has a much more linear footprint that allowed for many rooms to enjoy the river views, but also abundant daylight from multiple exposures. And let's not forget the wonderful clients. We connected straight away. As parents of 4 busy children, I personally have 5, so I knew their needs, and I quickly learned that they were all in on creating something that respected the history and grandeur of the house, but they were ready to shake things up a bit. I kept imagining the house in its heyday. I can't help myself. My mind always wanders to the party scene. I had visions of the house in the 1920s, full of fashionable guests and tippling martini glasses. I wanted the formal spaces to be elegant and sexy, hence the title in my book, Glamorous. Upon entering the entrance hall, it's pretty apparent that this is no cookie-cutter foyer. A bold pattern wallpaper paired with an antique settee and carpet creates the one element that every successful room needs: tension. Successful tension in a room design is when differing elements play off of one another to show up to better advantage, or actually just show up. Have you ever been in a truly homogeneous room where the parts are all so simpatico that you actually leave and can't remember any of them? So the tension in this foyer is the bold wallpaper as a backdrop for an antique settee and an antique oriental rug. And check out the sconces on the wall. They're edgy and modern, trimmed with long fringed leather, but they frame a classic antique Italian starburst mirror. And as a fashion reference, the dress on the right is also a study in tension. It has an old world feeling with floral fabrics, a high neck, and those pretty Juliet sleeves, but the flouncy short skirt is completely feminine and modern. And don't forget glamour. This house commands it, and my client appreciates it. So in addition to dotting many of the rooms in my client's favorite orchid color, we made sure to drip a little bit of gold all along the way. So this velvet sofa has soft curves echoed by the soft curves of the cocktail table. Dramatic tall mirrors and custom curtains bring more notes of luxury. As does this white lacquered ceiling, which has an almost mirror-like quality in person. So much of design is subjective, but scale, proportion, and balance are truly the right and wrong. And you can see how we've worked to balance the weight of furniture in this room on the left and right side. We've also balanced color by dotting certain areas with a patterned pillow or two, or adding artwork with color. Now, both husband and wife were so engaged with me in this 4-year project, but I must confess, I channeled the wife as my muse and inspiration. I kept her lifestyle and fashion sense front and center in the more formal spaces, but also the less formal. She's chic, and so are her parties, but she's also a busy, carpooling mom. I wanted every room to be pretty enough for one of her lovely gatherings, but I also know her, and I know on most evenings she's chilling on the sofa after a hectic day. So I knew that her living rooms should be built for real living. So we moved our palette into the adjacent dining room. Color continuity between connecting rooms is always our goal, and that delicious shade of orchid appears again in the ombre linen curtains and the custom-made lamps. The floors are left bare, and the waxed ceiling is flecked with gold leaf. The adjacent powder room carries on the color theme with an overscale floral wall covering and a custom gilded vanity base. We definitely dripped a little bit of gold in this little room. And here we're at one end of the house, a library that offers an exotic retreat. I find in many houses, and I'm sure that you find in your own as well, that you're drawn to different rooms in different seasons of the year. And this feels like the coziest of winter rooms. Rich teal blue walls and silk curtains wrap the room. The brass chandelier creates a magical pattern on the ceiling when lit, and the lush rug in thick wool warms up the floor. Now, mixing up the vibe are the more organic shapes with the curves of the coffee table and the mirror behind the sofa. Now, this cozy space segues into the sunniest of conservatories. Light abounds, and the glass chandeliers conjure up thoughts of celestial orbs. I love rooms that can multitask, that can wear a lot of hats. And this room offers lounge seating as well as a great surface for homework, games, and during COVID confinement, yes, you guessed it, a home office. Now we've got 2 more quick stops to make in this home. This is the breakfast room. It has some of the best views of the river below. And notice how the light fixture is so light and airy. That's on purpose. We were doing everything we could to keep that view open for all. And just outside is this covered terrace with casual seating and dining. We're going to dive more into outdoor rooms in just a little bit, but this one encompasses so many of my favorite outdoor elements, especially the fireplace. Now, the views from this terrace are onto an expansive pool area. And if you look back up at the chimney on the right, that's the terrace you were just visiting. And the icing on the cake, I say, is this precious little pool cantina. Mom and Dad can whip out snacks and lunch right through that collapsible window. So now we'll go to our second house, one of my favorites, and definitely one with an old soul. Built in the mid-1700s and relocated to its current spot in the 1930s, the chapter on this house in my book is aptly named Soulful. It truly has an old soul in the form of a suspected ghostly inhabitant that made their presence known to my client when they were touring the house for purchase. My client was walking up the front steps with her real estate agent and felt a decided sense of energy barring her from entry. Well, that would have been the moment that I would have sprinted back down to my car. But undaunted, my client forged ahead and then returned another day and walked the house, talking out loud, assuring that she was going to love the house, care for it, and that she knew that she was just a visitor, that the house likely belonged to others. Well, it worked. The purchase went off smoothly, and so did the renovation that followed. It has a wonderful entry with original doors and brightly colored tribal rugs. An antelope printed stair runner sort of sets the tone that this is not a typical historic home interior. And I love the long view through this house. Oh gosh, I'm getting ahead of myself again. I love this. We're in the living room now. We're looking through the foyer and into the dining room. And here is the other side of that room, and you can actually see one of those tiny original doors. I'm going to flip back for 1 second. We kept most of the house sort of as is while upgrading the system, but we did actually enlarge these cased openings off of the entrance hall just to have a more gracious, welcoming entry. But this is what they looked like on the right in their original state. With the tall mantels, they almost appeared like hobbit doors. So it really was a transformation. And here's a little fashion inspiration. My client reminds me so much of these images. She loves funky ethnic patterns and accessories, but there's also a very proper ladylike quality about her. And also remember about those living rooms. They should be built for what? For living, of course. Equally appropriate for casual family time or dressed up for your holiday gatherings. And I can tell you, so much living happens in this welcoming room. It's rich with layers of artwork, textiles, a splash of contemporary accents, some antiques, and most importantly, multiple seating areas that invite conversation and lingering. So let's get back to those concepts of scale, proportion, and balance. Those are the guiding factors also when creating a gallery wall like this one. And I'll drop a few tricks on how we do this. First, I gather up all of the pieces of art I plan to use. I like to mix mediums, framed pieces, unframed pieces, vintage or antique, as well as contemporary. It's also really nice, if you have it, to mix in a 3D element, like a small sculpture on a decorative bracket. Anyway, I find a large space on the floor that mimics the space I have to work with on the wall, and I tape it all out, and then I bring in a tall ladder, and I start playing around with the pieces, and I climb up and down on the ladder and look at it, and when it's right, when I have the scale, the proportion, and the balance correct, I snap a picture from up above, and it's done. So now we're in the dining room. This space definitely has a storied, old world feeling with more groupings of my client's antique art collection. Now behind the main dining table, there's an additional, smaller area for more intimate dining. If you have space in your dining room, it's so nice to be able to include a seating area like this. One of my biggest complaints from my clients is we don't use our dining room enough. Well, faced with a large table, 2 or 3 people might gravitate towards something more intimate. But if you have a spot like this, it's a little cozy people magnet. This is such an elegant image of a simple back stairwell, but it has an important historical reference. The newel post, which is actually the supporting post at the base of the stairs, significantly predates the house. So imagine this, when constructing the house in the 1740s, those homeowners went out and looked for an antique ornament to sort of embellish their house. Even more charming, the house had a brief time as a school for boys, and several of them thought it would be fun to carve their name in the newel post. So these images, again, further reflect my client's fashion sense. As in her interiors, she loves layers of pattern and texture, but an earthy, grounded palette. She loves comfort, but she wants to make a statement. She also wants to convey her worldly perspective and her openness to all kinds of cultures and ideas. So in this inviting morning room, grass cloth envelops all the walls and the ceilings. This is another one of my favorite rooms, another multitasking one. It has an inviting window seat, and sofas and chairs are covered in layers of pattern. And I love that weird topsy-turvy stacked ball table. It brings this Alice in Wonderland element. It's also the note of surprise and humor that a room really needs. So now we're in the husband's library. Walls are in deep blue-green with lots of red accents. In the spines of the antique books, the window shades, and the artwork. And note the artwork, the painting, propped on the floor casually. That's the note of surprise here. It's a reminder that everything in this house is not so buttoned up. These interiors are fluid and open for change. So I've shared a little bit of my own journey and my process for creating my house. I've also given you that snapshot into a couple of other highly personalized houses. And I'd like to close today with one of my most frequent questions. What is trending? Now, I often caution, if it's a thing that is trending, by the time we all know it, you know to ask me about it, I know to tell you about it, it's probably on the way out. But if it's a design approach to a lifestyle change, I think it's worth taking note of. So there's two trends that I see happening right now, and COVID only encouraged this, but it's the trend toward moving rooms outside. And the second is, I've been calling it our growing global design world, but it's really our shrinking global design world, and I'll explain more. Well, one thing is for sure, the outdoor room is here to stay. Several years ago, I noted the amazing outdoor kitchens that my clients were gravitating toward, and that quickly pushed the need for outdoor dining. The outdoor dining room yielded the need for more serving surfaces, and we've always needed the place to gather before and after. And outdoor living is so popular that we need outdoor fireplaces to warm us in the cooler months and outdoor beverage fridges to keep us cool in the summer. Our formula for outdoor living is simple. If it's a living room, treat it as such. Would you ever go to a furniture store and buy a full set of matching living room furniture straight off of the showroom? Probably not. Well, the same holds true for an outdoor room. We love to mix our materials. We like to use some woven pieces, some stone, maybe concrete, maybe iron. Use multiple materials and textures, just like inside. This is a wonderful old-school screened-in porch. The house is in Fishing Bay, Virginia, on the Chesapeake Bay. Dating from the 1800s, the porch is appropriately outfitted with an inherited collection of vintage wicker. We just added a fresh coat of paint, brought in lots of indigo-colored pillows and accents, and this is another my favorite little corner of the porch. It's just a couple of simple camping cots, but it was actually featured a few years ago in Coastal Living magazine. But please note, it's strategically located right under that ceiling fan. It's the perfect spot for a waterfront siesta. Now we're up in the Allegheny Mountains of Virginia, another wonderful outdoor room. Interesting about the design of this room is the consideration that we had for the high winds that whip around these mountains and whip around this terrace. You might not be able to see, but there are chains at each corner of that lantern light fixture. It's anchored for stability. And also note that coffee table. It's a solid chunk of teak wood. I watched the 5 movers bringing that table in, and I can promise you that if the winds pick up, it's staying put. And this is a covered terrace of a slightly more contemporary home, also on the James River in Richmond. And notice all the curves of the sectional sofa, as well as the sculptural shapes of the woven chairs. Remember, there are few plumb lines in nature, few sharp edges. Curves just seem to meld naturally into outdoor environments. And at this same house, the beautiful adjacent outdoor dining space. I love that they left the dining platform uncovered. You're at the mercy of Mother Nature's whims, but what a magical night it would be to sit there and dine under the stars. And this outdoor room is actually the porch of my home in Richmond. We live in the city, busy sidewalks, surrounded by schools and churches, so we have lots of entertaining activity on the sidewalk. We added this porch to our turn-of-the-century home several years ago, and it's truly become our favorite living room. And now we're down in South Florida. You can probably tell from the colors and the vegetation. Floridians are pros at outdoor living. The rest of us are just playing catch-up. You may have noticed that in most of our outdoor rooms, we limit the color palette to neutrals, whites, blacks, maybe taupe. I always encourage our clients to let Mother Nature dictate the color. It's almost always better than something that interior designer is going to come up with. But in Florida, there are amazing tropical flowers, like this gorgeous purple bougainvillea on the left and all the lime green tropical plants. So we threw in a bit of color by adding turquoise planters and also a few turquoise pillows. And of course, that funny little paper umbrella on the right, that's our note of humor here. So now our global world. I think we're all aware our own backyard is a global one. It used to be that if your home featured a few international treasures, they were a memento from an exotic trip. Now, if a person is drawn to the organic patterns of, say, an African Kuba cloth, they just have to do a quick Google search to find an importer. Or even they can get straight to an African dealer on Etsy. Say your passion is antique Swedish furniture. You don't need to visit Sweden. Rather, a quick tour of websites like Cherish or First Dibs will result in a huge score of vetted dealers. So you might ask, do I shop for my clients this way? Absolutely. When COVID made traveling internationally, but also just traveling to antique fairs, virtually impossible, my armchair antiquing landed us some amazing finds. So here I am shopping for textiles and rugs while traveling. Of course, traveling is more fun, but just a reminder, you might live in an urban location where the shopping opportunities are good, or you might live in a tiny small town like the one I grew up in. Wherever you are, you or your designer can have just about anything delivered to your door. Now, in this truly global dining room, a dramatic horn chandelier from South Africa tops a pedestal dining table, its top reminiscent of a parquet floor. The antique architectural panel that covers most of the wall on the right is from the south of France, and an antique Italian mirror tops an early American maple cabinet. Other graphic elements like artwork and hand-blocked curtain fabric hold their own with equally strong statements. Another international room, also a dining room. The wall covering is by a French company called de Gournay, but the wall covering is actually painted by artisans in mainland China. The gold punched metal chandelier is from Morocco, the antique mirror above the sideboard is French, and the half sunburst above the fireplace is 18th century Italian. It's truly a small little United Nations going on in one room. Another big score. This beautiful, and this is in a historic home on Richmond's Monument Avenue. We found this beautiful Biedermeier secretary from Austria via First Dibs. It arrived in perfect condition and, as promised, appraised at more than our purchase cost. And you know all about my love of textiles. I found this tapestry draping across the table from an internet dealer. You've seen me use tapestries as bed hangings, and I also frequently use them like this in tablescapes, as well as draped on a chair or along the back of a sofa. Oh, and now lastly, I have an amazing story about just how small our global economy in design has become. It's actually centered around a woman that I met in Washington, D.C. a few years ago. A woman who approached me and thanked me for an Instagram post I had shared a few months before that while I was visiting Morocco. So to give you a little background, I created the post while I was trekking in a remote village in the Atlas Mountains. I include these images so you can visualize just how remote I was. That donkey is actually my porter. The road to our Casbah was incredibly rough, way too difficult for a cart. So on the hike to our lodgings, my daughter, who was traveling with me, peered into through a crack in the doors of a small shack on the side of our path and said, "Mom, come look." I ran back and found that the shack was filled with stacks of colorful rugs. So back at our Casbah that evening, I asked the person at the front desk if anyone knew about the rugs. They said yes, and that they would contact the necessary person. So this is actually the image that I shared on my Instagram post the next day. Now, little did I know that this sweet, charming man I soon came to know as Fatah had walked all night long to meet me at 8 a.m. sharp. Well, the contents of the shack did not disappoint, and our small group bought 25 rugs. As we gathered up every form of currency to settle up with him, he just yanked out his square and said he was happy to take our card. So then I asked, how would I get the rugs? He said, it will be no problem. He would load them onto his donkey and walk them into a nearby village. Once there, he would wait until he encountered a friend or someone that someone knew, he said. Then he would instruct them to take them to Marrakesh, and he would say, DHL. So we hiked back to our transport that morning, and of course, we all wondered if we would ever see the rugs. So this next image is comical, but a bit unsettling. This is the image that Fatah shared with me a couple of days later to offer comfort, as I could clearly see the rugs were on their way to me on his donkey. So let's flash back to Washington, D.C. and the Instagram post. The woman I met was just back from her own trip to Morocco, quite the adventurer. Once there, she took the location that I had just posted in Instagram. She then hired a driver in Marrakesh, told him to take her there. Once in the village, she wandered around and asked if anyone had ever heard of someone named Fatah. Well, sure enough, she found him, and better yet, she also bought several beautiful rugs. I mean, is that amazing? I'm sorry. What an adventurer, and what an amazing tool that Instagram is for all of us. So now here we are, halfway around the world, and some of those beautiful rugs are in locations. This one is in my Chapel Hill condominium, and this one is in an adorable nursery we recently finished. It was just featured in the June issue of House Beautiful. And also at that same client's home, this gorgeous room-sized rug. This family room, as well as the nursery before, are part of the same project. And if you missed it in House Beautiful, you can take a much deeper dive into this house in my book. It has its own little chapter called Eclectic. So I can't thank all of you enough for coming. You've been an amazing audience. I've loved being here, and I think that Diane, are we gonna do a few questions? Where is Diane? Is that, for people who are interested, I think we have time. Yeah, yes, okay, yeah. Okay, so do I call in the people for questions, or is Diane taking care of that? Yeah. Okay, Martha, maybe you can identify him because I can't hardly see. Okay, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes.
What do we do with our files of mail and our files of how to do? Like, I have a decorative box in my house that we put mail in. And I feel like these colors are so beautiful, but where's their, stuff?
Yeah. So, right. So I think what she's saying, what she's asking is, the rooms look so impersonal, like where's the stuff of life, like mail and other stuff and clutter that life brings with it. Is that fair? Okay. So, well, yeah, so, I mean, and I do always tell people, and it's especially good for homeowners to see when we're going in to photograph their house, they're a wreck. You know, they're like, oh my gosh, there's children's shoes, there's a bad dog, there are things everywhere. But I think what you should, when you open up a magazine or if you open up my book, I promise you, what is absolute perfection in that room is just where the lens is focused. There's mayhem all around there. There's camera equipment. There's flower props. So, and I mean, and to an extent, life is like that too. But if you're talking about how to declutter your house, that's another conversation. But I would tell you, you know, things are happiest when they have a home. You know, if you don't have a home to put them in, they're just going to be around you. So, but yes, it's not all like it looks right there. I promise. My house definitely isn't. So let's see. Is there another? I can't see. Do we have another question? Hi. Yes. Oh my, yeah. So this is actually, I'm so glad you asked me that. So what I'm so most proud of is that the book has 9 chapters, and the houses are from all over the place, mainly Southeast. But there's of the 9 chapters, there's 5 whole house chapters and 4 chapters on design concepts. Well, the 5 whole house chapters are all Virginia-based. They are all in and around the Richmond area or just Piedmont, Virginia, really. And I'll just tell you, I was lucky, but when my book pitch was marketed, multiple publishers were interested in it. And we kept having these interviews, and they kept saying, give us the geography of where these houses are. And I said, these are Virginia houses. And they all said, in Virginia? These are publishers. And I said, yes, these are also, I'm just really proud of the fact, I think we've come a long way. We were always known for our history, and then there was a time when we came to be known for our food. And I will tell you, the design world and our community of artisans, of artists, of makers, my peers, other designers, it is happening in Richmond, Virginia. And I'm just so proud of those 5 houses and just kind of where we've come. So, sorry, I went off of the, but I'm proud of that. Okay. Yes, Miss Fred. Yeah, I really did. I really did also, I really did enjoy the organization of it. It was kind of like I talked about in the beginning, the jumbled stack of tear sheets and things you've scribbled on a napkin and all that sort of thing. I love taking all of those things and say, hey, there was a method in the madness, that happened here. And I had help with that. I had a book agent that helped me figure out my message. And so I did enjoy it. And it was quiet when I was really writing the book. So this is starting to be a new phase, actually selling the book. So I'm getting used to that. But I did enjoy it. And I do love, what is happening in print literature, like interior design magazines, is print media is shrinking. The digital market is really sort of taking over. And so even if we got like an incredible feature in a shelter magazine like House Beautiful, we would be lucky to get 8 pages. And I have like 45 images from this house. So I couldn't tell the story of the house. And in the book, I really get to tell the story of these 5 special houses and lots of other houses as well in a smaller way. So yes, I did enjoy it. I know. Yes.
I was wondering if you were ever indecisive and just talk about how you have a board.
Yeah. So she's asking if I'm ever indecisive. My husband would say no. But of course I am. But I also think I'm indecisive about other things. Interiors, I've just been doing it a long time, and I've learned the things that I agonize over, are a waste of time. My knee-jerk knows better, and I just need to listen to my knee-jerk. But that truly comes with the practice of doing it. Most people that come to me for help are paralyzed. They have tons of indecision. So I think that is classic because typically it's an investment and you just don't want to screw it up. But for me personally, at this point, that is not something that have a pretty clear vision of what I want to do. But that's just by the sheer years, I promise. You'd be doing it. You'd be decisive too if you were me at this point. Okay, here's somebody's phone ringing. Oh, well, yes, Trey.
I'm going to speak for a handful of men in the room. I'm sure from time to time you've had male clients. Can you describe the difference between working with a male client versus a female?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can, and since I was trained at home on this because I do have 4 of my 5 children are boys or men, and so I did grow up. They did grow up in a fraternity house of sorts, but I do think for men are incredibly tactile. They're incredibly focused on comfort. They are very much focused on function. And if they've gone to the trouble to pick up the phone and call me, they also care about form, or else they would have just gone to a store and bought what they liked. So if they've gone to the trouble to hire a designer, form is in the mix. But I would say comfort and function is key. And then, quite honestly, I see so many of my team sitting there. I think they would completely concur that some of our most engaged clients are male. I mean, we have a lot of couples, and I'd say 75% of the time, the husband comes and he says, oh, she had some stuff to do. She had some stuff to do. And the wife just knows that it's a bigger priority for him, so she's just acquiesced. She's just said, do it, whatever, I'm not getting into this. So that is a change for me, like I guess in the last decade. 15 years ago, I didn't see that so much. I would say now 25% of our clients come to us as a unit, as a couple, and both people come to every meeting, which is great. I love it because then they don't have to go home and explain how we got to the process of where we got. But then there's that part where often it's just the male. So not as different as you might think, but I would say tactile and function, comfort are three big things important to your gender. All right, how are we doing on time? Okay, so anybody else? I think we're good. And I just, again, I love being out. I love being at the Women's Club. You all were a wonderful audience, and let's have a glass of wine and celebrate. Thank you for having me.